Some people commit crimes and get caught. That's dumb enough. But then they walk into a courtroom, look a judge dead in the eye, and say something so stupid it deserves its own Netflix special. These are 50 real excuses criminals actually tried to use in court. Some of them almost make you feel sorry for their lawyers. Almost. 1. So a guy gets pulled over, and his trunk is absolutely packed to the brim with weed. Instead of panicking, he looks the officer dead in the eye and claims he's an independent biologist. His highly scientific mission? Researching the foraging habits and short-term memory loss of local squirrels. You honestly have to admire the sheer audacity of telling a cop you are running clinical trials on woodland rodents. Unsurprisingly, the state did not buy his grant proposal. His groundbreaking research has been officially relocated, and he is now completely free to study the fascinating behavioral patterns of his cellmates in the state penitentiary. 2. Facing felony charges for stealing a neighbor's lawnmower, one defendant stood up in court and boldly declared he wasn't a thief, but a mechanical freedom fighter. He passionately explained to the judge that the mower looked incredibly sad and deeply neglected sitting out in the yard. Therefore, he was simply liberating it to a much better, more loving home. Naturally, the judge was deeply moved by this profound display of empathy for landscaping equipment. So moved, in fact, that he decided to immediately liberate the man from polite society for the next couple of years. Sometimes, heroism comes with an orange jumpsuit. 3. We have all been betrayed by technology, but one tourist took it to an entirely new level after aggressively insulting a police officer. When the handcuffs came out, he frantically blamed Google Translate. He swore he was merely trying to ask for directions to a local landmark, but the app apparently fed him a phrase that was incredibly hostile and highly personal. Unfortunately for him, the presiding judge was not exactly a Silicon Valley tech enthusiast. He sternly informed the confused traveler that the word guilty requires absolutely no translation software to understand, no matter what country you are visiting. 4. Getting caught red-handed inside a bank vault is usually a bad sign, but this guy claimed he was simply doing some intense method acting. He told the judge he was preparing for a gritty role in a massive Hollywood blockbuster and desperately needed to feel the raw motivation of an actual armed robber. Honestly, you have to respect that level of dedication to the theatrical craft. Thankfully, his breathtaking performance did not go entirely unnoticed by local authorities. He ended up booking a long-running, non-paying gig in a highly secure, state-funded production, where the wardrobe is exclusively neon orange. 5. Poaching out of season is a serious offense, yet one hunter found deep in the woods had a totally foolproof defense ready to go. He swore to the game warden that he was a gifted animal empath. Before pulling the trigger, he claimed he received clear non-verbal consent from the buck itself. Yes, he basically argued the deer nodded and said it was perfectly ready to visit the great forest in the sky. Sadly, the animal in question was completely unavailable to testify on his behalf, so the warden hit this woodland whisperer with a massive fine and confiscated his gear. 6. Picture a guy frantically stopped at a grocery store exit with a massive, live lobster shoved aggressively down his pants. Instead of just admitting defeat, he strongly insisted he wasn't shoplifting. He claimed he was merely taking his new crustacean friend for a quick stroll because the store's display tank looked entirely too cramped and inhumane. The judge actually commended his fiery passion for marine animal rights, which was a nice touch. Right after that, though, he brutally sentenced the guy to a very small, incredibly cramped concrete enclosure of his very own. Talk about cruel irony. 7. You literally cannot write comedy this good. A criminal completely ruined his own store robbery by violently slipping on a banana peel he had just thrown on the floor moments earlier. When the cops scraped him off the linoleum, he confidently stated this was actually his final practical exam for a prestigious clown school. He told the courtroom he was just trying to perfect a slippery getaway routine. It is safe to say he absolutely failed his criminal endeavors, but he definitely earned a passing grade straight into a maximum security holding cell to practice his juggling. 8. Imagine walking into your kitchen at 3 in the morning to find a totally random guy casually making himself a turkey sandwich. When the police showed up, the burglar tried to play it cool, claiming it was an honest mistake because he genuinely thought he was in his own house. That excuse might have actually worked if he had any acting skills whatsoever. Oh, and also the tiny detail that his actual residence was located 2 entire states away. And his real kitchen definitely did not feature a very confused golden retriever aggressively staring him down. 9. Busted on a street corner with a massive stash of illegal substances, one hustler frantically declared he was absolutely not a drug dealer. Instead, he branded himself an amateur social scientist currently filming an undercover YouTube documentary about urban economic trends. The presiding judge absolutely loved his immense creativity and passion for independent filmmaking. In fact, to help further his budding cinematic career, the court generously offered him a brand new long-term documentary subject. He now gets to analyze the daily survival tactics and cafeteria menus inside a federal prison for the foreseeable future. 10. Getting physically tackled by the exact person you are actively trying to rob has to be deeply humiliating. But this mastermind decided to aggressively pivot and claim he was the actual victim. He desperately insisted to the police that the minimum wage store clerk had secretly hypnotized him with a powerful, calming gaze, forcing him to surrender completely against his own will. It takes a very special kind of crazy to blame retail workers for having magical eye contact. The jury, completely unsurprisingly, was not even slightly mesmerized by his ridiculous supernatural defense strategy. 11. Walking out of a supermarket holding a massive, unpaid family-sized frozen lasagna is generally frowned upon. But this shameless guy tried to tell security it was absolutely not retail theft. He eloquently described his actions as a rogue, unsolicited cultural food exchange program. To prove his supposedly noble intentions, he proudly pointed out that he had deliberately left a single unwrapped breath mint on the freezer shelf as his equal contribution. The court did not appreciate his culinary generosity and immediately enrolled him in a vastly less tasty meal exchange program run by the State Corrections Department. 12. Tossing a 15-pound bowling ball off a busy freeway overpass is a fantastic way to end up in handcuffs, which is exactly what happened to one aspiring street physicist. When interrogated, he calmly told detectives he was just doing a routine check to see if gravity still worked properly in that specific neighborhood. He honestly framed it as a selfless public service. The local police department quickly confirmed that gravity was, in fact, working flawlessly, especially when it came to the heavy metal handcuffs they forcefully slammed onto his wrists before throwing him in the cruiser. 13. Randomly smacking a total stranger extremely hard on the back of the head is a bold life choice. But the attacker had a completely heroic excuse ready to deploy. He confidently told responding officers he heavily suspected the guy was a dangerous activated sleeper agent from a spy movie. He was merely testing the man's combat reflexes as a matter of urgent public safety. The victim's reflexes actually proved to be truly excellent, considering he instantly pulled out his smartphone, dialed 911, and pressed felony assault charges without missing a single beat. 14. Trying to talk your way out of starting a massive bloody brawl in a crowded bar is tough. However, one guy firmly claimed the entire ordeal was just a tragic biological misunderstanding. He looked the judge right in the eye and insisted he never punched anyone, but simply suffered from a very rare, deeply powerful, and physically aggressive sneeze. That sounds completely plausible, right? Unfortunately for his medical defense, multiple sober witnesses happily testified that he had about 6 more of those violent sneezes, and every single one looked exactly like a perfectly thrown right hook. 15. If you are going to blame an unprovoked physical assault on demonic possession, you might as well aim for absolute royalty. A woman arrested for violently attacking her boyfriend told the courtroom she was taken over by the spirit of Beyoncé. She swore under oath that the hit song Irreplaceable entered her soul and forced her to throw hands. The judge listened patiently to her entire musical defense strategy. After a brief pause, he legally mandated her to pack everything she owned in a box to the left, right next to a steel toilet. 16. Let's take a second to question the intellectual capacity of a guy who robs a local convenience store and gets arrested exactly 10 minutes later. Where did the cops find this criminal mastermind? He was casually sitting at the public bus stop directly outside the crime scene. patiently waiting for his heavily delayed getaway vehicle. He genuinely got mad at the officers, aggressively arguing that he had already paid his exact fare and had every constitutional right to use municipal transit just like any other law-abiding citizen. Public transportation really is a killer for quick escapes. 17. Writing a massive pile of wildly fraudulent checks is a fast track to court, but this woman swore her financial logic was totally bulletproof. She told the judge her personal psychic strictly guaranteed she was completely destined to become a millionaire by the end of the week. Because of this spiritual promise, she felt totally justified in pre-spending her universally promised funds on luxury goods. The judge took a moment to look deep into his own mystical crystal ball and accurately foresaw a very grim future packed with heavy restitution fines and 5 years of strict probation. 18. Wrapping your shiny sedan around an old oak tree is hard to explain to your insurance company, but one driver tried passing the blame to the paranormal. He swore to the responding paramedics that an angry ghost had violently ripped the steering wheel right out of his hands. He even gave a highly detailed physical description of the Phantom, specifically noting its incredibly terrible defensive driving skills. Unsurprisingly, the judge decided to just bypass the Ghostbusters entirely and press charges against the only person in the vehicle who actually had a measurable pulse and a suspended license. 19. Stealing a car is bad enough, but casually jacking a fully equipped emergency ambulance requires a very special level of crazy. When the police finally boxed him in, the man frantically claimed he had just heard the ice cream truck jingle and became completely disoriented by his craving for a popsicle. Honestly, you really have to wonder what is actually worse here: the massive felony grand theft charge, or the humiliating public admission that you legitimately cannot tell the difference between a blaring medical siren and a cheerful looping song about frozen dairy treats. 20. Finding a completely wasted guy passed out in a crashed car is a standard Tuesday for highway patrol. But this genius woke up, pointed a shaky finger straight at the passenger seat, and boldly blamed his dog. He passionately insisted his deeply loyal golden retriever was the designated driver for the evening. You have to imagine the officers standing there, wondering if they legally need to administer a breathalyzer to a canine, or if the dog gets his own court-appointed pawyer. The dog, being a very good boy, maintained his constitutional right to remain totally silent. 21. Most people face assault charges for using knives or bats, but this guy decided on a fully operational buzzing tattoo gun. Standing before the jury, he confidently claimed he was absolutely not attacking the poor victim, but was instead generously providing a completely free, highly artistic tattoo. The victim, who was now sporting a ridiculously poorly drawn skull, permanently scarred onto the middle of his forehead, strongly disagreed with that specific artistic vision. The court ultimately decided to give the defendant some brand new permanent ink of his own, mostly in the form of a 6-digit inmate number. 22. Being discovered completely uninvited inside a family's living room while firmly clutching their flat-screen television is a terrible spot to be in. The burglar immediately panicked and introduced himself as a highly motivated real estate agent who simply assumed the property was currently vacant and ready for staging. The actual homeowner, who was standing there directly pointing a loaded shotgun right at his chest, was definitely not in the market for a new broker, especially not one who schedules his exclusive open house viewings in the pitch black at 2 o'clock in the morning. 23. When an officer tapped on the window of a guy passed out behind the wheel at a green light, he got a very creative response. The heavily intoxicated man slurred that he definitely wasn't driving. Instead, he claimed his sedan had become deeply emotionally attached to the dive bar they had just left and was violently refusing to drive back home. The cop, acting as a highly trained vehicular therapist, decided to graciously help them both through this severe codependent crisis. He instantly impounded the heartbroken car and threw the driver straight into the back of a cruiser. 24. Smashing a hotel vending machine with a rusty crowbar usually makes you a vandal, but this guy insisted to security guards that he was a literal hero. He passionately pointed out that a specific bag of potato chips trapped behind the glass was dangerously nearing its printed expiration date. He claimed he was simply executing a high-stakes emergency culinary rescue mission. The local police department generously thanked him for his brave service by hitting him with a massive property damage charge and a hefty fine that could have easily bought him a lifetime supply of fresh snacks. 25. If you are going to steal an outrageously expensive luxury yacht, you really need a blockbuster excuse ready. When the Coast Guard finally boarded the stolen vessel, the guy screamed that he was actually a visionary survivalist. He claimed he was just temporarily borrowing the boat to successfully escape a highly classified, secret zombie apocalypse that literally only he had been warned about. The judge decided to take zero chances with public health. He strictly quarantined the visionary captain away from the rest of society inside a heavily fortified, windowless prison cell, just in case he was actually right. 26. Doing well over 100 miles per hour on the freeway is practically a guaranteed trip to jail. But this driver stayed completely calm, rolled down his window, and smoothly told the state trooper he was absolutely not speeding for fun. He was simply utilizing highly advanced aerodynamic techniques to properly air-dry his luxury sedan after leaving an automated car wash. The deeply exhausted officer had to patiently explain that physics absolutely does not work that way, right before handing him a massive citation that cost enough to hire a full team of professional detailers. 27. Getting caught violently sucking premium gasoline out of your neighbor's parked car with a rubber hose is a tough look. Yet, this woman tried to claim the moral high ground. She told the cops it was all a terrible community misunderstanding. She classified herself as a brave Good Samaritan who was selflessly removing a highly volatile and deeply poisonous liquid from the vehicle before it could randomly explode. Her overwhelming dedication to neighborhood public safety has now proudly earned her the prestigious title of Head Good Samaritan in the state prison laundry facility. 28. We live in a deeply exhausting digital age, proven perfectly by the absolute genius who robbed a gas station using a brightly colored plastic water pistol. When heavily armed police slammed him into the pavement, he screamed that the neon toy was not a weapon at all, but a limited edition collectible water blaster worth several $100s. He insisted he was simply showing the cashier its incredible retail value to negotiate a possible trade for cigarettes and energy drinks. His highly innovative barter economy theory impressed absolutely nobody in the courtroom, and the judge gave him plenty of time to practice his negotiation skills with people who actually carry real weapons. 29. You honestly have to admire the sheer, unfiltered audacity of a man living in Florida who angrily dialed 911 to file a formal consumer complaint. He was furious because the bag of crystal meth he had just purchased on the street was of completely subpar, unacceptable quality. I am not kidding. He genuinely demanded that the local police track down his dealer and legally force him to issue a full cash refund. The dispatchers were absolutely thrilled. The police did end up making an arrest that sunny afternoon. It just wasn't exactly the one the guy wanted. 30. Trying to score cheap beer with a fake ID is a classic teenage rite of passage, but this 19-year-old completely ruined it with terrible graphic design skills. He handed the bartender an ID that proudly featured his own incredibly nerdy photograph, but clearly listed his legal name as the legendary action star Chuck Norris. When the bouncer questioned him, the kid doubled down and swore the real Chuck Norris was actually the one lying about his identity. Amazingly, the kid was not instantly roundhouse kicked straight through the front plate glass window of the local dive bar. 31. Getting stuck halfway through a fast food drive-thru window at 3 in the morning is a fantastic way to meet local law enforcement. When the cops finally pulled him out by his belt, the man furiously demanded to speak to a manager. He insisted he was not a burglar, but an undercover corporate health inspector conducting a surprise agility and security stress test for the late-night graveyard shift. The judge was unswayed by his dedication to fast food safety standards and rewarded his impressive gymnastics with a hefty fine and a stern ban from all local burger joints. 32. When loss prevention officers tackled a guy sprinting out of a department store with a pile of stolen electronics, his defense strategy was truly medically fascinating. He calmly told the judge he suffered from an incredibly rare neurological disorder that literally forced him to move through life in perpetual, cinematic slow motion. He passionately argued that he fully intended to pay retail price, but simply could not physically make it to the cash register before the manager locked the doors. The incredibly unsympathetic judge quickly delivered a very standard, totally guilty verdict at a perfectly normal, highly efficient speed. 33. During a totally routine midnight traffic stop, heavily armed police officers uncovered a massive brick of premium cocaine sitting casually on the passenger seat. The driver looked around the cabin in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. His incredibly scientific theory: a freak meteorological event occurred, and a powerful gust of wind must have violently blown the illegal narcotics right through his partially open window while he was driving down the interstate. Local law enforcement officials are reportedly still keeping a very close, highly vigilant eye out for this absolutely legendary, completely devastating cocaine tornado he so vividly described. 34. Stumbling down a busy city sidewalk while screaming at pigeons is a fantastic way to get arrested for public intoxication. But when the cops finally tossed this guy into the back of a cruiser, he indignantly claimed he wasn't drunk at all. He argued he was a dedicated academic conducting an undercover social experiment to document how modern society judges the inebriated. The amused police officers decided to help him fund the next phase of his research, strictly monitoring how he acts while trapped inside a crowded drunk tank. 35. Taking a peaceful walk through a public park is completely ruined when you suddenly spot a grown man sunbathing on a wooden bench while entirely naked. When furious police arrived to cover him up, he protested that he wasn't being indecent or creepy. He labeled himself a holistic wellness enthusiast, claiming he was simply trying to absorb essential vitamin D in its purest, unfiltered form. The disgusted judge recommended a brand new wellness routine that legally mandates wearing actual pants in public spaces. 36. If there was ever a shiny golden trophy handed out for the absolute dumbest criminal on the planet, this guy would easily take it home. He confidently walked right into a local bank and handed the terrified teller a threatening robbery note. The absolute genius part: he had scribbled his violent demands on the back of his own heavily past-due electric bill, leaving his full legal name and current home address completely visible. His excuse? He was just desperately trying to save paper and be environmentally friendly. The cops were incredibly grateful for his strict, self-incriminating commitment to recycling. 37. Frantically shoving a massively expensive pair of designer high heels into an oversized purse usually screams retail theft, but this woman tried to claim complete medical immunity. She passionately yelled at mall security that it was absolutely not a crime, but rather a completely horrific orthopedic emergency. She claimed her current shoes were so incredibly painful that she was legally forced to execute an immediate footwear swap just to survive the afternoon. She heavily insisted she wasn't a desperate criminal, but actually a highly brave, incredibly heroic first responder, acting purely for the immediate safety of her own collapsing arches. 38. Sitting in court, facing multiple felony robbery charges, one man confidently deployed the absolute most cliché defense in legal history. He passionately swore to the jury that he was completely innocent and that his estranged, identical evil twin was the actual notorious mastermind. It was a flawless strategy, right up until the smirking prosecutor projected a childhood family photo proving he was very literally an only child. Without missing a beat, the guy shot back, claiming that was exactly the kind of deceptive photographic evidence his evil twin wanted the jury to see. Surprisingly, nobody bought the interdimensional family drama. 39. Stealing miles of heavy copper wire from an active residential construction site is a highly lucrative felony, but this guy decided to rebrand his crimes as high-level contemporary art. When cops caught him violently ripping the plumbing out of a wall, he calmly claimed he was absolutely not a desperate scrap metal thief. He declared himself a misunderstood performance artist, focused on an interactive piece brilliantly titled "The Illusion of Private Ownership in a Decaying Industrial Society." The judge absolutely loved the incredibly pretentious title, but decided his artistic performance needed a heavily secured new venue for the next 36 months. 40. You have to deeply respect a criminal who uses his own sheer stupidity as a totally valid legal defense strategy. A guy who attempted to rob a local diner while wearing a fully intact floral lampshade over his head argued he should never be formally convicted. His passionate defense was that his chosen disguise was so incredibly absurd and fundamentally stupid that literally no rational human being could have ever felt genuinely threatened. He was essentially pleading not guilty by reason of extreme incompetence. The highly amused judge entirely agreed his master plan was deeply moronic and sentenced him straight to prison anyway. 41. Violent street crime took a hilarious turn when a suspect snatched a thick leather wallet from a tourist, only to be tackled while sprinting at top speed in the completely opposite direction. His explanation to the deeply unamused detectives was pure comedic gold. He heavily insisted he was absolutely not stealing the cash at all. Instead, he claimed he was simply trying to run the lost wallet right back to its rightful owner. But he had accelerated so fast that he dramatically overshot the original target by 3 entire blocks. The jury absolutely refused to buy his questionable theories of criminal inertia. 42. There is bold, and then there is stealing a running police cruiser while the officer is standing literally 10 feet away writing a parking ticket. When backup finally cornered him, the guy rolled down the tinted window and claimed he was just performing a spontaneous civic audit. He told the furious officers he wanted to ensure their fleet vehicles were properly maintained and handled well during high-speed tactical maneuvers. The judge did not appreciate his unsolicited mechanical feedback. The guy was promptly relocated to a state facility where the only thing he gets to audit is the cafeteria menu. 43. Sprinting naked through the middle of a crowded suburban shopping mall is guaranteed to cause pure chaos. When an out-of-breath police officer finally tackled the streaker near the food court, the guy looked him dead in the eyes and stated he wasn't naked at all. He swore he had just purchased an experimental prototype suit made of advanced, invisible fabric technology. The judge saw right through his sci-fi defense strategy and issued him a restrictive, bright orange jumpsuit for his very visible body. 44. Courtrooms are supposed to be deeply serious, highly intimidating environments, but one defendant clearly never received that specific memo. Right in the middle of his heavily contested felony hearing, the incredibly unhinged man suddenly leapt to his feet and burst into a massive, highly choreographed song and dance routine. When the furious judge violently slammed his gavel and screamed at him to stop, the guy innocently claimed he deeply believed his life was literally a Broadway musical, and this was finally his show-stopping solo number. The judge coldly informed him that his final act would be a completely silent performance inside a small padded room. 45. Getting busted with a massive brick of imported hashish is hard to explain away, but this culinary genius swore to detectives it wasn't for smoking. He passionately argued it was his highly guarded, secret gourmet seasoning blend designed for an upcoming regional chili cook-off. Unfortunately for his expanding culinary empire, the cynical judge declined the polite invitation to taste-test the spicy stew. Instead, he gave the aspiring chef 3 incredibly long years to fully perfect a brand new recipe using only standard-issue prison loaf. 46. When a guy in New York was violently pulled from the driver's seat of a heavily damaged stolen sports car, his passionate legal defense was pure, unfiltered fashion tragedy. He aggressively claimed to the arresting officers that his remarkably skinny designer jeans were entirely way too tight. He vividly explained that the denim pinched a deeply critical sciatic nerve, which literally neurologically forced his body to subconsciously commit violent grand theft auto. The completely baffled jury was left deeply wondering if they should actually issue a formal guilty verdict, or just immediately order the poor man a comfortable pair of oversized baggy sweatpants. 47. Sneaking into a city zoo after hours and trying to stuff a live penguin into a standard hiking backpack is a massive logistics nightmare. When security guards tackled him near the flamingo pond, he desperately claimed he was running an elite aquatic witness protection program. He swore the bird owed money to a dangerous underground mob of local seagulls and desperately needed to be relocated to a safe house immediately. The judge did not buy his bizarre avian mafia storyline, and the aspiring bodyguard is now serving time in a cage of his very own. 48. Drop-kicking a complete stranger in the middle of a sidewalk is universally considered felony assault. However, this guy confidently swore to paramedics he wasn't attacking the victim. He loudly declared himself an incredibly gifted self-taught street chiropractor. He insisted he was simply administering a surprise. high-impact spinal adjustment for the public good. He even had the sheer audacity to claim the victim's horrific screams were actually deep cries of pure medical relief, not absolute terror. The unamused judge rapidly adjusted his sentence to a very stiff 5 to 10 solid years behind bars. 49. Getting arrested for breaking into a closed natural history museum at 3 in the morning is already embarrassing enough. But this guy made it significantly worse by telling the responding officers he was simply conducting a deeply personal, self-guided after-hours educational tour. He passionately explained that regular admission prices had become outrageously predatory, and he firmly believed dinosaur fossils belong to all of humanity, not just people who can afford a $20 ticket. The judge wholeheartedly agreed that education should be accessible. He immediately enrolled the aspiring paleontologist in a fully funded long-term residential program with 0 gift shop privileges and mandatory lights out at 9. 50. Most people pull over immediately when they see flashing red and blue lights in their rearview mirror. This guy decided to absolutely floor it. When officers finally pitted his car into a ditch, he looked genuinely confused by the loaded weapons pointed at him. He enthusiastically explained he thought the siren was the official starting signal for a state-sponsored, late-night street racing tournament. He even asked the arresting officer if he won a trophy for lasting 10 minutes. The court did award him something, but it was just a suspended license and a hefty stack of felony evasion charges. 50 excuses. Not one of them worked. And honestly, a few of them probably added years to the sentence. Now, here's what I want to know. Drop a comment with a number of the excuse you think was the absolute dumbest. And if you made it this far without subscribing, that's more suspicious than half these alibis. Hit subscribe. You're already here.